Tall, iconic, mysterious. The saguaro cactus that we so closely identify as part of the majesty of the Southwest. Scientists want to know where it came from and whether it will survive coming changes in our climate. Native people venerate these mighty plants with respect and ritual. This time on Catalyst, how two stories of the saguaro, one of the sacred, one scientific, blend into one. All next on Catalyst. This YouTube edition of Catalyst is brought to you by Arizona PBS and Arizona State University. Life has problems. Science turns them into questions that can lead to solutions and even innovations. This is Catalyst, shaping the future through science research at Arizona State University. Do you know the names of your great-great-grandparents? How about their parents? Many of us are turning to simple genetic tests to find out more about our past and where our ancestors came from. Well, now scientists are turning some of those same tools on plants that don't give up their secrets easily.
The saguaros are real important out here. We look at them like people, like our ancestors.
Saguaro is both a symbol of the desert, but it's also something which interacts with virtually everything else in the desert.
Two different worlds, science and tribal tradition, connected by the iconic saguaro cactus. This towering figure is pushing science to new heights while preserving the past. Dr. Martin Wojciechowski looks to discover the genetic history behind this cactus, while Stella Tucker works to keep tradition alive.
We decided that it would be a local project and be local interest, so we thought, well, we'll just go out and sequence the saguaro genome. And that was the first thing that came up. And then begin using that to sort of understand the distribution of genes that code for or produce these adaptations that seem to be so common within cacti. That's a relatively straightforward thing to do, but not when you don't have any experience, okay? So this is like this is an order of magnitude or more greater in terms of the amount of data that we'd be generating that we've done in the past.
Unlocking the saguaro secrets takes a team effort. Wojciechowski and teams from Arizona State University, University of Arizona, the National University in Mexico, and the Desert Botanical Garden in Phoenix are working together to sequence the saguaro genome.
We took off, slices of two of the cacti, and then we came back into the lab to actually extract the DNA. And so we give them the purified DNA, and they send us back gigabytes of data, literally. It's sort of sorting out what are the functional genes. We had all the sequence data, and we looked at and we assembled the actual chloroplast genome. Each plant has a chloroplast. And the one striking thing was that it was missing a bunch of genes that are necessary for electron flow during the process of photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis keeps plants alive and growing. Just what Stella and her daughter Tanisha Tucker need to harvest a special gift from the saguaro, the fruit.
I started teaching her when she was about 8 years old. She'd go out with me. She grew up here. She's an expert now.
My name is Tanisha Tucker, and I'm a member of the Thana-Otham Nation. I'm out here harvesting saguaro fruit, which is a part of our traditional calendar of harvesting. My mother has been picking and harvesting since she was about the same age. So it's a tradition that's been handed down from generation to generation. The importance of the picking of the saguaro fruit is because it does start the new year, which if you continue on with the fruit and the harvest, it will bring about the monsoon season, the rain, and that's what we always believe. First, when making our picking poles, which are called in autumn the kuiput, we look for saguaro ribs. We use wire to wrap them and secure them together. We then gather the creosote bush and we use that as a cross section, and we get that onto the tip of the saguaro ribs, and that's going to be the hook, and that will be ready for the harvest. You are ready. And we go out to pick by looking and checking the saguaros, seeing how ready they are, and if there's a lot of red, plump fruit on there. Pick that saguaro, and then we will harvest it. We make sure to leave the pods near the saguaro. Traditionally, we've been taught to leave the pods up, so you're asking up for the Creator to bring rain, which brings on the monsoons.
Monsoon rains help the saguaro thrive and carry out photosynthesis. Wojciechowski and his team have discovered a unique process inside the saguaro DNA.
Cacti tend to live in hot, arid places. So CAM photosynthesis is a type of photosynthesis that you typically find in organisms adapted to hot, dry environments. It's a way of sequestering carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere at a time when ordinary plants don't. The adaptation to hot, dry environments is that the plant takes up carbon dioxide at night when it isn't as hot and the plant doesn't lose as much water. And then it stores it, and then it's used during the day.
Other plants adapted to hot, arid climates also use CAM photosynthesis, not just the cacti. But Wojciechowski has discovered the saguaro seems to be missing many crucial genes for photosynthesis, raising questions. Is the saguaro using a different process, or have these genes moved somewhere else in the cell?
Knowing that those genes are gone, we want to know where are they gone? I mean, have they simply moved to the nucleus? We don't think so. We don't find any evidence for them. It seems like they're gone forever. That system doesn't work, and there's been something that has sort of taken over. And so we want to understand how that's happened, because obviously cacti are under an enormous physiological stress in growing in hot, arid environments.
To fully understand this unexpected genome, Dr. Wojciechowski and his team went back to the beginning. Do all cacti have this reduced chloroplast genome? What
we wanted to know was this just something unique to saguaro? So we started looking at some other columnars. The Desert Botanic Garden as a source of materials, and having Lucas Majeur, an Opuntia expert at the garden, we decided we would sort of join forces.
So my name is Lucas Majeur. I'm an expert in prickly pear cacti, so Opuntia and relatives, so it's a pretty broad group. I've been at Desert Botanical Garden now for roughly 3.5 years.
What got you interested in cacti?
Well, I'm from the eastern U.S., and it turns out there are cacti in the eastern U.S., and this happens to be one of those. Prickly pear cacti, so the genus Opuntia. This is a really amazing example of the genus. This is one that's found in the Big Bend area of Texas and other parts of the Chihuahuan Desert. It's got a Opuntia macrocentra.
Although much smaller in size, the prickly pear cactus blossoms in a similar way to the saguaro.
One of our motivations was just to figure out what is saguaro most related to. There's a number of good candidates, but no one has sampled all of them, and no one has really gotten definitive evidence. We'd be doing the exact same thing, procuring tissues from different things, sequencing them, assembling plastogenomes, and then doing sort of a comparative analysis.
With countless specimen options, the team expanded their genome work to other cacti species.
As we come up to the Webster Auditorium is one of the examples of the giant columnars that are common throughout North America. This is the giant Mexican cardone cactus, genus Pachycereus. And as you can see, it's quite a massive plant.
The cardone cactus looks a lot like the saguaro. Would the cardone cactus be the closest relative to the saguaro?
They share some of the same growth forms, so there's really large columnar-like growth forms and really beastly cacti.
We see some of the other representatives of these giant columnars. Here in front of us we have an example of cactus known as Sanita. This is an unusual growth form for this species.
The organ pipe cactus also bears some physical resemblance to the saguaro.
So what we do when we typically sample from cacti is to get some nice young, fresh green growth. And here we're taking one of these new buds of this Sapuntia. We'll cut it off. We'll cut this in half. We'll put each of these pieces into this tube. One of the ways we preserve material is to use what's called a desiccant, in this case silica gel. And this extracts all the water out of the tissues and essentially preserves those tissues. And then we collect these and then take them back to the lab for actual extraction.
Back in the lab, Wojciechowski and Major extract the DNA for chloroplast comparison.
And the process here is to break up this plant tissue as much as possible. You can see we're actually getting to that point.
The next part of the process is taking a type of buffer. In this case, it's basically a detergent that we include with the material that we've ground up. And then once we have that available, we're going to pick that up with this transfer pipette and put that into our test tube.
DNA doesn't just float to the top of the samples. The researchers must separate it from the other plant matter.
So we're going to put it in this little Eppendorf centrifuge, and we're going to spin it for a minute. And so as you can see, there's a bunch of junk down at the bottom, and then this sort of clear liquid up here on top. That's where the DNA is. After a few more extractions, we will actually have purified DNA.
After the saguaro genome, these other cactus samples were sent to the same sequencing lab.
We didn't sequence any of them to the same extent as saguaro, but the idea there was that we could, with a little bit of data, determine their plastid structure, their chloroplast structure. And we found that all of them have this same highly reduced plastid genome.
The comparisons allowed the team to discover relationships between cacti that were previously unknown. And finally, one common ancestor.
Cacti in general, we think evolved from herbaceous plants. Like if you've ever heard of purslane, you may or may not have heard that. I grow it in my backyard, and saute it in butter. It's really great. Those are actually some of the closest relatives of cacti. So there's these little succulent herbs. They might, live for a year. They might live for multiple years, so be annuals or perennials. And those are actually some of the closest relatives of cacti, and they tend to grow in relatively dry places. What we are finding is a lot of the group had a common ancestor that's very similar to that, and then the ancestor that's sort of the overarching ancestor to the rest of Cactaceae evolved in these places we call tropical dry forests. So places like the Caribbean, really dry places on limestone in Cuba and Hispaniola and Central America. Those are the types of areas where we think some of the ancestors of Cactaceae came from.
Another common ancestor for the great saguaros, the Tucker family.
There are a few different stories about how the saguaros came about that are told from the elders. Some coming from them being human, actually, and then others from animals bringing them.
And as you see, when you go out to pick, you look at some of these saguaros, and they look like a family. This is what the harvest is all about.
Most people have never tasted the saguaro fruit, but its flavor is deep in the traditions of the Thanawathem.
The fruit is like a strawberry when you first pick it. And some are sweet and some aren't too sweet.
The saguaro is so significant, it even has a place in their sacred language.
The saguaros is the Hashan. And on the saguaro, the fruit is Bahidach. And then when we make the syrup, it's Sitor. Sitor and Kushur is jam.
Process of it is it mixes in with water, so it kind of thins the flavor out. It almost turns into like a juice. We sometimes call it Kool-Aid. But after it starts to cook down, you start to notice that there's a certain smell that you get. It's like mixed in with the mesquite, you get this smell of the saguaro fruit cooking. It continues to boil for about a good hour. After that, you'll start to see a foam coming up to the top, which that foam is any stickers, any debris, sometimes little ants that were stuck in the fruit, that gets actually scraped off the top. We then take it off the fire. We put it into one strain through a mesh wire that separates the juice from the pulp and the seeds. Then the leftover juice that we have from that first straining process gets strained also through a cheesecloth. And that final process of straining, then that juice is ready to be put back on the fire. After that, it's allowed to cook for anywhere from 4 to 6 hours.
The syrup sometimes takes all day before it's ready in the evening, and you cool it off and you jar them. It's like a dessert for them. You know, especially now the elders who are not able to do the harvest anymore. I've been out here almost 40 years. I'm going on 71 next month, and my body is feeling it now. Otherwise, I'd be out there with my daughter picking the fruit.
Stella isn't the only one growing old. These ancient neighbors have a long evolutionary history. But studying this map of the past proves difficult.
Well, saguaros are sort of a problematic organism because their lifetimes are on the order of 100, 200 years. Saguaros have probably been in Arizona for the last 10,000 years. They moved here as the area became drier and hotter. If you would have been here in the Phoenix Valley 10,000 years ago, what you would have seen are the kinds of plants that you now see up on like the rim, sort of pinyon juniper, bushes and things like that. So we know with just a few thousand years that that things have changed. The interesting thing for us is sort of we're at the northern limit, and so we think we're at the younger limit, dealing with much younger populations, and they're the ones that are really moving. As it gets warmer, we would expect saguaros to sort of move both perhaps further north, perhaps higher in elevation. Saguaros don't move very fast. I mean, the way they move is, pollinators and birds which feed on them.
Many people think of plants as being stationary, but they're moving all the time because they have animals that disperse them, that move them from one place to another. And whenever a plant gets moved into a place that's favorable for their existence, they'll stay there, and they keep moving in those directions because they have animals that are constantly moving them around. In the case of things like saguaro and other plants that typically like warmer regions in the world, they're actually moving further north because it's staying warm.
Global warming may affect the cactus population and how and where it spreads on the landscape. With temperatures rising, scientists are waiting to see the full effect of the warmer weather.
In the case of saguaro, because the lifespans are so long, it's going to take them a while to respond. But respond they will, I think. It's what's called a keystone species. And a keystone species in a community is that species which oftentimes might be dominant in terms of biomass. But it also serves as a source of resources for lots of other things. This isn't just a plant that you see in the desert and it shows up in John Wayne movies and all those other things. It's an integral part of the community.
An important part of the community and an indispensable family member to the Thahnawautham who grew up on this land. Today, Tanisha leads groups into the desert to teach them how to harvest the saguaro fruit.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Saguaro Harvest Camp. So if you want, you can taste that too. The goal for me right now is to continue teaching it, but making sure to focus on the tribal youth, because of course we want this to continue on to the next generations and generations to follow.
Hey, Mom! Hey, Mom!
And now to this day, I'm here. And now it'll be my daughter. She's doing real well. In fact, I told her next year you're going to take over. You're going to make the decisions for the camp, and you're going to make arrangements for groups to come. And I said, I'll just be there. You know, if you have any questions, I'll be here.
It, couldn't have come together better. People that have knowledge and expertise in cacti. It's been a great team.
For the scientists, the saguaro provides a link to the larger story of life on Earth. And for the Thana'atham, it provides hope for the future.
Part of our culture, and it's a dying culture, because nobody's hardly doing it anymore. I'm just hoping that this culture will go on and the younger kids will learn to continue this culture.
Yeah, so you guys do your blessing.
I'd like to see more of them come out here and pick and learn all about the saguaros, because the saguaros are real important out here. We look at them like people, like our ancestors, our elders. So hopefully it'll go on. They won't forget.
I'm Professor Vanessa Ruiz, and thank you for watching Catalyst, our show about shaping the future, how research creates real-life results. And because our lives have new problems that science can solve, we'll be back soon with more stories.
Catalyst is supported by Knowledge Enterprise Development at Arizona State University, advancing entrepreneurship, innovation, discovery, and knowledge for the public good.
Subscribe to this channel to see more episodes of Catalyst on YouTube.